What's up, guys? Welcome back to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Tesla, ticker symbol TSLA, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Friday, February 9th. Well, Tesla stock here today up almost 2 points a share, $1.98 a share, 1.06%. Let's take a quick zoom in and just start here by looking at the intraday moves on the 1 minute chart. You know, as far as intraday scalps are concerned, you know, Tesla is one that I'm always keeping a very close eye on for intraday opportunity. And, you know, all I'm seeing on this one is going to be a very obvious one, and that's right here. Now, we saw this sloppy test of that 2 standard deviation volume weighted average price band. It's going to be that red line there. And then we saw kind of a pullback and a retest. Okay. Then we saw this retest and rejection. Had this headed back upside and made another retest, I would have entered a scalp there off of that test. I think that over the long term, setups just like this one, even if you have that sloppy first test and then you have that cleanup test, as I kind of like to call it, off of what I've kind of coined as volume weighted average price resistance, which is that red line, support, kind of the green line. When you have setups like this, which, by the way, it doesn't happen every day on Tesla. I'm always watching 50 plus stocks to find these setups each day. Over time, I have found it personally to have statistical edge. Okay. By the way, if you guys want to get my personal intraday scalp setup alerts, maybe some swing trade setup alerts, unusual options activity, or even platinum one-on-one, that first link in the pinned comment will allow you to choose from a selection of 4 different membership options, all in the Roensch Capital Gold server. Get grandfathered in at the current rate, and I hope to see you join. But let's now take a look at the 5 minute chart and look at volume on these moves here to try to understand the sample size and bias of the market today. So what we actually see here is not uncommon at all. You have the biggest volume candle of the day on the open, happened to be a sizable red candle. That's fine. And then you saw this bottom, and then we kind of began the grind up of the day. Now, what I would call the biggest pump of the day is kind of in this region here, right around 11:10 a.m. Eastern time, you know, about an hour and 40 minutes after the market opens. And you can see that volume spikes on those 2 green candles. Now, if you're a bull, remember, what we're looking for here, just for context, is we're always looking for volume spikes and dump-offs that correlate with movement in the market. For example, if you're a bull, you're going to want to see big volume on upside moves. And if you're a bear, you're going to want to see big volume on downside moves, and then small volume on moves that go against your sentiment here. Okay. Now, we have to take this in the context of understanding that we're already going to get big volume immediately off the open. So understanding that context, where is somewhere where we might not expect to see big volume spikes? Well, here. Okay. We saw massive volume spikes just in that 10-minute time frame that Tesla was pumping, probably the biggest it did all day if you take this bottom out. Okay. Now, if you're a bull, that's not a horrible thing to see. But let's get more contextual here and look at the 30-minute with the self-fulfilling prophecy technical levels, right? With the 50 period that everybody watches and the 200 period that everybody also watches. Here on the 30-minute chart, this is just one chart of 3 that we're going to look at here for these more contextual views day to day. That 50 period, though, is incredibly relevant right now. I mean, we're talking it's less than a point below the current stock price. So here's what I'm watching. From a bullish perspective here on the 30-minute chart in particular on Tesla stock, if we see a downside test of that 50 period on the 30-minute, the bulls are going to want to see that ideally hold as a support level, as it has 3 times in the last 3 trading days. And if you're bearish and we see a retest of that 50 period, you know, you're going to want to see that snap to the downside and open up that kind of next psychological level that I think a lot of bears will obviously be thinking here on the 30-minute upon a break downside of the 50 period, looking for potentially a retest of that 200 period from a bearish perspective. Okay. Remember, always giving both sides here. 4-hour chart. This one also incredibly relevant here. Take a look at this. The 50 period, that white line here on the 4-hour, is currently sitting right around 186.85-ish. Okay, that is not a big move away. We're looking at approximately a 1.4% downside move to make a test of that. Again, similarly, we just recently reclaimed that in the last 2 trading days here on the 4-hour. If you're a bull and we see a retest, we're going to want to see this curling upside ideally and holding that as a psychological support level. If you're a bear, you want this thing curling back downside and the stock breaking back down beneath that 50 period here on the 4-hour chart. Let's now look at the most important chart of all. That's going to be the daily. Okay. Again, recently, we've talked about this, but we recently had this, what many people would call the quote-unquote death cross, the 50-day crossing downside over the 200-day. Listen, for me, I think it's overhyped, personally. I think it doesn't work. I think it's a lagging indicator. And I think the crossovers mean almost nothing. When do they mean something? When they turn into psychological, you're gonna get sick of hearing me say this, self-fulfilling prophecies. When people and institutions and funds and algorithms who are programmed by humans make decisions around levels, all of a sudden they tend to work more often than they don't. So when the stock price isn't even in the vicinity of the moving averages, because they crossed over, to me, I'm not really considering it a whole heck of a lot. But what I am watching on the daily chart are psychological levels. We have a psychological and technical level. It's a range, kind of between 177.50 and 180 that we've been talking about a lot. Listen, if you're a bull and we see a retest of that, you're going to want to see that hold. That's a really big level. Okay. 200 is also a huge psychological level. So from a bullish perspective here in the near term, it doesn't have to be tomorrow necessarily, right? But ideally, get back above $200 a share, right? And if we see a downside test of 177.50 to 180, hold it as support. Okay. Now, if you're a bear, you're thinking just one thing: please reject off $200 a share. Okay. And you're looking to break down beneath 177.50 to 180, that channel, right? That range. Implied volatility still falling down to about 44.5%. Now, if you own options, whether that's calls or puts, you may have noticed some IV crush as of late. This right here is going to be your offender. But also understand, remember, the lower that goes, it opens up potential opportunity for new options buyers to potentially benefit from IV pump. If we were to see IV go lower, we see buyers come in, and then we see IV maybe pump back toward equilibrium. That would benefit those new buyers, okay, through the Greek Vega. Let's now finish out here. Let's round out with the bias in the options chain, the real trader bias today. 2 million total contracts traded today. 1.16 million of those were calls. 839,000 of those were puts. Okay, we're seeing a bullish bias here with overall ratio. The short-term speculators, that 0 to 20 delta, 400,000 calls, 331,000 puts. Again, seeing a slight bullish bias with the short-term speculators there. And then in the mid to longer term, the 61 to 80 and the 81 to 100 delta ranges, we're actually seeing, once you collectively put them together, relatively undecided here with the in-the-money contracts between calls and puts. Okay, so relatively undecided in mid to longer term, those in the money. Those short-term out of the money, 0 to 20 delta, slight bullish bias. And overall call put ratio, bullish bias here on Tesla today. Remember, as always, manage your risk. The options traders can, of course, be wrong. Listen, before you head out, please subscribe to the channel. Our goal is 1,000 in the next 2 weeks. I think we can do it. And if you get value out of these, I very much so appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next one.